The coldest truth about ancient sleep is simple. When night fell, staying warm was not about comfort first, but about surviving until morning. That matters because a still human body loses heat fast, especially to wind, wet ground, and the long hours when movement stops. Prehistoric people did not leave us bedtime diaries, so this story has to be rebuilt from archaeology, climate evidence, physiology, and careful comparison. That means some claims are strong and some are only possible, and separating those two is important if we want real history. The strong evidence points to fire, animal hides, clothing, shelter, group sleeping, smart site choice, and protection from wind and wet ground. The weaker claims include dramatic images like people routinely sleeping inside mammoth carcasses, which is vivid but not strongly proven as normal practice. Even without that image, the real picture is dark enough, because sleeping in glacial or near glacial conditions was a constant survival test. A sleeping person cannot keep generating heat the way a walking hunter can, so night turns cold into a much more dangerous enemy. Cold also worked together with predators, smoke, moisture, and fire failure, which means ancient bedtime risk came from several directions at once. Fire was the center of that system, and by the time humans occupied colder parts of Eurasia, controlled fire had become life support. Fire gave heat, light, social space, tool-making power, and some safety from predators that might avoid flame and noise. But fire was also work, because a night fire did not keep itself alive while everyone slept peacefully for 8 easy hours. Daylight had to be spent gathering fuel, protecting it from moisture, and choosing the right hearth place inside shelter or near a windbreak. In some treeless regions, people may have relied not only on wood but also on dung, peat, or even bone fuel to keep warmth going. That detail matters because ancient evenings were planned around fuel the way modern homes are planned around electricity and heating bills. If the fire died in severe cold, the whole group could face an emergency before dawn, especially children, elders, or anyone already weak. Yet too much fire inside a tight shelter brought another danger: smoke that hurt eyes and lungs or even made breathing unsafe. Sparks could also ignite bedding or hides, so prehistoric shelter had to balance warmth with ventilation in a narrow safe zone. Ancient people were not choosing between warm and cold in some simple way. They were managing freezing, smoke, and fire hazard at once. One of the harshest facts is that the ground itself may have been just as deadly as the air above it. Lying directly on frozen earth, stone or snow pulls heat away through conduction, and that can become dangerous even when the air seems manageable. So ancient sleep required insulation underneath the body, not just something thrown over the top like a blanket. Archaeology gives us an important clue from Border Cave in southern Africa, where researchers found ancient grass bedding layers. That site was not an Ice Age Eurasian snow camp, but it proves that very early humans already knew how to engineer sleep surfaces. Some plant materials there may even have helped repel insects, showing that bedding design solved more than one problem at the same time. In colder regions, people likely use grass, reeds, brush, moss, bark, hides, and fur to build sleeping platforms above dangerous cold ground. That principle is timeless. A person can lose enough heat into the earth to die even if there is some protection from the wind. Animal skins and furs were another major technology, because warmth in prehistory often came from turning dead animals into living insulation. Archaeologists rarely find complete ancient outfits, but the tool evidence is strong enough to tell the story with confidence. Scrapers used to process hides are widespread. Bone awls appear early, and later eyed needles show up in the Upper Paleolithic record. Those tools matter because shaped clothing works far better than a loose hide when night air can slip into every opening. A hood, wrapped leggings, fitted footwear, and layered furs would have made a huge difference once the body stopped moving after dark. Recent research suggests tailored hide work may even have begun before eyed needles, using awls and older methods to shape coverings. That means prehistoric people were not only wearing skins, they were gradually solving a design problem about sealing warmth around the body. Cold sleep especially punishes the hands, feet, face, and neck, so covering extremities was likely essential rather than optional. Group sleeping probably helped too, because humans are social mammals and shared body heat inside a confined shelter can reduce heat loss. That sounds simple, but it changes how we picture ancient nights, because privacy and personal space were luxury ideas warmth could not always allow. Children, elders, and other vulnerable people likely benefited most when bodies were pressed close under shared coverings near a managed hearth. Communal sleeping also improved security, because more bodies meant quicker response if a fire failed or a predator came too close. Night in prehistory was not passive darkness. It was a threat environment where warmth and safety were tied tightly together. Shelter design mattered because a cave was not always available and was not always the best answer anyway. People used caves, rock shelters, open-air camps, tents, brush structures, huts, and even semi-subterranean forms in some places. In parts of Eastern Europe, Upper Paleolithic sites show mammoth bone dwellings with hearths, proving some groups built serious cold-weather living spaces. The value of any shelter came down to microclimate, meaning the small thermal world around the sleepers inside it. A small, protected, dry shelter can outperform a larger drafty one because wind exposure strips away heat with brutal efficiency. Reducing interior volume, blocking wind, keeping bedding dry, and maintaining safe access to the hearth were all engineering decisions. Even a shallow depression, snow berm, hide-covered frame, or earth-backed wall could improve survival if it cut drafts and held warmth. Popular retellings often say ancient humans covered themselves in animal grease before sleep, and that idea needs careful handling. Animal fats clearly mattered for calories, hide treatment, waterproofing, skincare, and fuel in many cultures and environments. So using fats on hides or even on exposed skin is plausible in some contexts, but the evidence for a universal bedtime grease ritual is limited. What is better supported is that fat-rich animals were precious because they gave both food energy and materials for warmth-related tasks. The line between eating an animal and sleeping warmly because of that same animal was very thin in cold ancient life. Now we get to the famous mammoth carcass image, where a person supposedly sleeps inside a huge dead body to stay warm. In emergency logic, that idea is possible because a large carcass can block wind and may hold residual warmth for a short time. There are later historical and ethnographic stories from other settings about people using animal bodies in survival emergencies, but strong archaeological proof that Ice Age humans commonly used mammoth carcasses as normal sleeping shelters is weak. So the honest version is this: possible in rare crisis maybe, but not proven as routine prehistoric bedtime practice. What is strongly proven is that mammoths and other large animals were used for meat, marrow, hide, ivory, bone, and sometimes structural material. Moisture may have been an even worse enemy than cold air, because wet bedding or wet clothing destroys insulation fast. Snow melt, freezing rain, condensation, or sweat from sitting too close to the fire could all turn a survivable night into a dangerous one. That means ancient people had to manage dryness carefully, not just heat, which adds another layer to how skilled they had to be. Predators added pressure too, since lions, hyenas, wolves, bears, and other carnivores shared many prehistoric landscapes with humans. Fire, shelter choice, noise, group sleeping, and maybe staggered vigilance all helped reduce the odds of a deadly night encounter. Biology helped in some ways through acclimatization, body proportions, and metabolic flexibility, but culture did the heaviest lifting. Humans spread into cold regions not because our naked bodies are naturally built for frozen nights, but because culture extended the body. Clothing, bedding, containers, fire, planning, memory, and cooperation turned a fragile ape into a species that could survive the north. Some scholars argue that night insulation may have mattered just as much as daytime clothing in helping humans expand into colder latitudes. A person can survive a cold day by moving, but a cold night demands warmth while movement stops, and that may have been the true bottleneck. Think about the checklist hidden inside one prehistoric sunset. Gather fuel, protect embers, dry bedding, block wind, and place the most vulnerable sleepers safely. Children and elders likely changed camp decisions, because a shelter that worked for a strong adult might still be too risky for a weaker body. Site choice mattered, because a small sheltered place near fuel and away from wet ground could decide whether a group woke up alive. A camp with too much smoke could damage lungs and eyes, while a camp with too much draft could steal heat all night long. That means ancient people needed practical thermal judgment, not just bravery, and they had to repeat that judgment every evening. Bedding had to stay thick enough to stop heat loss into earth, yet dry enough not to trap deadly moisture against the body. Clothing had to be layered enough for stillness, because what works during a hunt may fail when a person lies motionless for hours. Group sleeping reduced heat loss, but it also reduced privacy, proving again that survival often forced social closeness modern people never have to consider. A managed hearth probably meant someone listened, watched, or woke easily, because total sleep while the fire died could become disastrous. Fuel planning mattered so much that wood, dung, peat, or bone could shape where people camped and how far they traveled in winter. Even the order of sleepers around the fire may have mattered, with stronger adults helping shield children or elders from drafts and cold edges. Predator danger pushed the same system harder, because warmth, noise, firelight, and group closeness also doubled as defense. That is why the carcass myth spread so easily. People sensed that prehistoric cold was so harsh that almost any desperate idea feels believable. But the real story is better than the myth, because archaeology shows careful systems, not just shocking improvisation. Humans built bedding, tailored hides, maintained hearths, used mammoth bones in some shelters, and kept learning how to trap warmth more efficiently. Those skills were cultural memory, passed from older people to younger people the same way toolmaking and hunting knowledge were passed along. Lose that knowledge, and cold could kill. Keep that knowledge, and whole groups could push farther into Eurasia than naked biology should have allowed. That also means sleep technology belonged beside hunting technology, because surviving the night was as important as finding food by day. A successful camp was really a heat system made from fuel, insulation, shelter shape, body placement, and experience earned over many winters. Every hide scraped clean, every grass layer placed above cold ground, and every ember protected through the dark added one more chance of seeing dawn. Even the best shelter could fail if bedding got wet, the wind shifted, or fuel ran out before morning. So ancient cold sleep demanded backup thinking, which means people likely planned not only for comfort but for what could go wrong at midnight. That constant risk helps explain why cooperation mattered so much, because one tired person alone is weaker than a group sharing fuel, warmth, and vigilance. It also explains why children had to learn these habits early, since the rules of fire, hides, and dry bedding were survival knowledge. The cold was teaching a hard lesson every night. Warmth is built, not given, and mistakes are punished fast. That lesson shaped human expansion itself, because people who could trap heat after sunset could live where bare human skin should not have survived. In that sense, a bed of grass, a stitched hide, and a protected hearth were as important as a spear point or a hunting plan. Those tools did not merely make winter easier, they made northern settlement possible. They turned sleep from a deadly pause in activity into a managed thermal system that culture could improve from one generation to the next. That is one reason prehistoric cold survival belongs in the same story as fire, clothing, and migration across Eurasia. So the darkest thing ancient humans did to sleep in cold was not one shocking trick pulled from a horror story. It was a full nightly system built out of fire, fur, hides, dead animals, packed bodies, careful shelter, dry bedding, and constant planning. Animals became food, clothing, blankets, tools, fuel, and maybe in rare emergencies even temporary shelter from a storm. A mistake made at dusk could become fatal by dawn, which means bedtime skill was a survival technology, not a simple routine. That grim discipline helps explain human success, because our species conquered the cold by building artificial warmth out of landscape, memory, and cooperation.